Pokemon challenge runs mean a lot to me, but they bring up some questions. If people are looking for difficult strategy games, why are they even playing Pokemon? Why don't I just play games designed for that audience instead? What's so special about this certain way to play a game made for children? Is it about the Pokemon, or is it something else entirely? And what games could I be playing instead? A Nuzlocke is a self-imposed set of rules to make Pokemon dramatically more challenging. The two major rules are that when a Pokemon faints in battle, they're considered dead and can no longer be used again, and you may only catch one Pokemon on every route, meaning that your resources are finite and limited. Now, a Soul Link is a two-player Nuzlocke variant of these rules where two or more players are going to play the same game simultaneously, but their Pokemon are linked together, and the game is usually randomized. For an example, my starter Pokemon could be a Spoink, and my friend Jaden has a Kyogre. These Pokemon would be linked, and if one of them faints in battle, then they're both dead. While Kyogre is on Jaden's team, I must keep Spoink on my team since they're linked together. And each team cannot have repeated primary types, so if Jaden also had a Blastoise in his box, he would have to make the hard decision on which to use, and we'd come to that decision together. If any of us lose our entire team in battle, we white out, and that's the end of the run for all of us. I think Soul Links are a lot of fun, and they've been growing in popularity in recent times. Popular YouTubers like Jaden Animations and Alpharad have attempted their own Soul Links, while others have also been around making Soul Link videos for years. Recently, I've been getting into game development and have spent a great deal of time thinking about the design elements and systems present in these challenge runs. I've spent more time doing Pokemon Nuzlocke than playing the game the way Game Freak intended. I want to ask the question of why people like me continue playing with self-imposed rules on these games, and are there other games that provide a similar experience out there? I've decided on 4 defining aspects that make Soul Link special. The first of these aspects is long-term resource management. The Pokemon you catch are a valuable resource, as you only have a limited number of encounters throughout your Pokemon Nuzlocke. As you reach harder fights, you'll need many options available so you could have a strong and balanced team. By losing a whole bunch of Pokemon in early fights, you end up with fatal flaws in your team, and that leads to a loss later on. For example, if we're going up against the first gym leader Brock, most of us aren't too concerned about losing the run to him. But what if we can't beat him without losing any Pokemon? And if we can't, which Pokemon can we afford to lose? These decisions come up commonly in all forms of Pokemon Nuzlocks, and it turns what would be a small short-term decision into a worthwhile long-term one. The thing about a Soul Link is that the decision impacts each player differently. The second major aspect is necessary cooperation. This may seem counterintuitive since you're actually playing separate games, but that's the thing that truly elevates the co-op experience. This isn't the same as most team games where a single player could carry the whole team and the others just get dragged along. In a Soul Link, you are only as strong as the weakest link. If you don't compromise so that all players have enough power to succeed, you will lose. Ideally, one player should never only have weak Pokemon, since there should be options present to switch up the teams. This forces every player to have a say in the decision making, and no player ever plays a backseat to their overpowered friend. Overpowered Pokemon don't break the game, because sure, Neil has a Rayquaza, but that forces me to keep this little ice cream cone on my team alive. The next aspect is the exciting variety of Pokemon you end up using. It's such a great moment when you discover that your Pokemon has a powerful ability, and with so many random encounters, the chance of getting a strong and interesting Pokemon is always high. With new Pokemon, you play around different things on your team, and sure, you always have to bring the enemy health down to 0, but you won't be doing that in the same way every time. Depending on how challenging your personal rule set is, a Soul Link could take multiple attempts to actually beat the game, but every single new run is a fresh opportunity to discover new Pokemon and abilities. Some of the best moments come from catching new Pokemon, learning new moves, and evolving your current team members. Individual gameplay is constantly changing. The last of these major aspects that I've settled on is luck. Youngster Joey could have a small, perfect Rattata, or maybe he has a Dialga. When an opponent has some crazy, overpowered Pokemon, it initiates panic mode for the whole team, and we all start scrambling to come up with a way out of the battle. The game is never decided, it's never a free win. Things can go wrong, and when they do, it leads to moments where you must adapt to survive. There are many moments of risk and reward, though that reward is often not dying. To get through difficult battles, you need to take risks. At other times, you'll be looking to minimize risks, playing around critical hits. The game is always unpredictable, and it tests how well you can handle that. From these points, doing a Pokemon Soul Link would be fantastic, but there are problems too that I haven't mentioned. And that's what leads me to seeking out other similar game experiences. The most obvious problem is that this isn't how the game was intended to be played. There are many things in the game that don't contribute well to Nuzlocke. Grinding is the killer of fun and challenge runs like this, and it has come down to a point where most people use rare candies to keep their Pokemon matched with opponent gym leaders. These runs would take 10 times as long otherwise, and it would make super uninteresting gameplay spending hours fighting low-leveled wild Pokemon. A good fifth of the time in a run is already spent mashing the A button through unskippable dialogue. Some options that the game gives you are so far from worth considering that it must be some kind of joke. Pokemon Rhydon learns Leer at like level 42. That's insane. It's okay that some Pokemon are naturally worse than others, but if I'm gonna have the option to gain a new move, I don't want to waste my time like this. The time commitment of a full playthrough is much more than most groups are able to do. Scheduling for one additional person for a 15-hour long campaign is hard enough, but trying to play with more than 2 can be impossible to schedule. This game would significantly be improved if a run lasted around 2 to 6 hours instead, allowing for the possibility of truly reaching some sort of achievement in just one sitting. Nuzlocke have large similarities to roguelike games, where you face permadeath and randomly generated levels, while strengthening yourself and facing constant choices. Slay the Spire is a deck-building roguelike that I thoroughly enjoy, and it presents the player with plenty of long-term decisions and allows for the discovery of new synergies. The mod Spire with Friends may actually be the closest I've gotten to being like Soul Link in a different game. In Spire with Friends, 2 players will play together, not directly interacting with each other, but there are couriers that let you trade cards and relics to the other player. If either player loses, it's game over, and the map is a web of choices that the players will work through together. Deck building roguelikes like this are fantastic, and I'd say the Slay the Spire is the most polished one out there. I'm a slightly bigger fan of the game Monster Train, which follows a similar system, but instead of 4 playable characters, there are 6 clans present, and every run you get to combine 2 of them, which makes the game incredibly fresh on every new run. These games do evoke a similar feeling to Pokemon Nuzlocke, but aside from the Spire with Friends mod, there isn't really co-op present in these games. The Slay the Spire mod doesn't cut it for me. I'm looking for games that were built for this. I could make a whole discussion on how I feel about cooperative games. When I play a game like Risk of Rain 2 or Gunfire Reborn with friends, I am not cooperating with my friends. I am playing the game independently alongside them, and we're all just trying to survive and do lots of damage. These games are still fantastic, and it's not a bad experience at all, but it isn't a cooperative one. This has not tested our teamwork abilities. When trying to find Nuzlocke similarities, Dungeons & Dragons and Baldur's Gate by extension come to mind. In D&D, you end up making plenty of team decisions, and there is permadeath, characters can die in battle, but that's where the similarities largely end. While in combat, it's often players doing their own thing and trying to deal as much damage as possible, or fulfill some other team role. Making heavy decisions on what sacrifices to make is something that doesn't come up often in that kind of gameplay. Building a character is super engaging and fun, but I find that on Level Up I lack meaningful choices the majority of the time, especially if I'm not choosing new spells upon level up. If I chose to play a barbarian or fighter, it's crucial to me that victory should only be achieved by all players working and thinking together. There are 2 cooperative strategy games that I've found that stand apart from the rest, Inkbound and Spirit Island. Inkbound is a turn-based co-op strategy roguelike. It presents constant decisions and risks for the team to take, but it does fall into the trap that one overpowered player could end up carrying the whole team. This game has fantastic strategy, and different builds feel very unique so far. The long-term research management you really end up sacrificing would be your health, but with every upgrade you get an engaging, difficult choice, which usually doesn't have a clear right answer. There aren't many things that I fault the game on, but a Soul Link aspect missing would be the necessary compromise, since the strongest player could spearhead decisions, and if they remain strong, then that might matter more than any other player catching up.
The other game that strikes pretty close is Spirit Island. Spirit Island is a co-op strategy game where a group can play as unique spirits defending an island from settlers trying to claim the land. This game is incredible. It's well made in both theme and gameplay, and the only major issue is that it's a difficult game that isn't easy to learn. The game seriously does present those hard decisions that affect each player differently. In both Inkbound and Spirit Island, the player turn is simultaneous, so you can discuss within the group on who wants to go first and who is able to deal with which problems. The game has a fantastic roster of playable characters, as you can choose from one of the other 30 spirits, and each spirit has such a different playstyle. Some challenging spirits feel like you're playing a completely different game, and the skill ceiling is incredibly high. For a board game, I think this is about as good as it gets. But being a board game does come with some issues I have with the game versus others I've talked about. The level of randomness is much less adaptability required. And if you were to play without the event deck introduced in the Branch and Claw expansion, the only random things to adapt to are where the invaders choose to attack on their next turn. As strategy gets more complex, it becomes a lot harder to keep track of all those things that would be automatically done if it was a video game. And trying to learn this game can take a few hours before you get a grasp of what you're doing. So I found some other games that were intended for people with my interests. That means I could stop playing this children's game, right? Even after playing all these fantastic games, I still find myself going back to Pokemon Soul Links. The hardest thing to find in a cooperative game is that aspect of essential group decisions and compromise. It's so common that the individual player needs could just be irrelevant in decision making, since the strongest player can often carry the team to victory. This makes sense and is likely the easier and arguably better way to design a cooperative game for everyone to have fun. But there is something missing when the group doesn't have to come to a compromise to meet the needs of each player. The huge amount of Pokemon you can end up using is also something that's hard to find in any other game. The massive amount of variability and options. There's something special about Pokemon Soul Links for me, and my favorite game ever is still these made-up rules on Pokemon. There's nothing out there that beats the experience of catching exciting Pokemon with my friends, facing surprising threats, and adapting with thoughtful team decisions. Going forward, I'll keep playing these games for sure, and as I start making games for myself, I hope I can utilize the good aspects from Soul Links. There's a wealth of good ideas that are just waiting to be used in future games. In the end, it's not fun for the sole reason that it's Pokemon, but the fact that this way to play only continues to grow in popularity is a sign that we've stumbled upon something very, very special.